You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, where each episode we break down a different propaganda song. This episode, we're talking about Cut Into the Earth, track number 4 from 2005's Potemkin City Limits on Fat Records.
The track 4 placement of this tune threw me for a loop today. When I was looking at the back of the LP, I was like, oh, this is track 4. Like I wasn't even taking into consideration that this song has the same track placement as Back to the Motor League. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, and how different the two songs are.
Couldn't be more different. Like that's such an interesting thing when you think about the previous record and going into this record, like how one was Back to the Motor League and one is Cut Into the Earth. That's really wild to me. I'm just putting that together like literally right now.
Didn't think about it.
Love it. Anyway, so we're talking about Cut Into the Earth, and we've already done our episode on Bringer of Greater Things ages ago. And so this is the song just before Bringer of Greater Things, making this Cut Into the Earth and Bringer of Greater Things a back-to-back Todd section on Potemkin City Limits. And this is a super interesting, approximately 6.5 minutes of music because they bring in a new element. This is like the new Todd, the first song post Empires that we hear from Todd. Do you know what I mean? It's a really different element of Todd's songwriting in propaganda that varies immensely from his work in I Spy, in songs like Fuck the Border or New Homes for Idle Hands. I mean, at first, I couldn't decide if I liked this back-to-back Todd package of Cut Into the Earth and Bringer of Greater Things more, or like, so they do this back-to-back on Potemkin, and then on Failed States, a couple of records later, they do another back-to-back Todd section of Rattan Cane and Hadron Collision. And for the longest time, I was like, oh my God, Rattan Cane and Hadron Collision are my favorite back-to-back Todd songs. But after listening to these two songs today, Bringer of Greater Things and Cut Into the Earth. Cut Into the Earth and then Bringer of Greater Things. And then listening also to Rattan Cane and Hadron Collision. These two are my favorite pairing.
Oh, hands down.
Of Todd songs and propaganda.
For sure.
And if you would ask me that 2 weeks ago, I would have said the Rattan Cane and Hadron Collision were my favorite Todd combination pairing. But these two songs are so thematically important together. They're just unbeatable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mentioned before, I wasn't super cemented as a long-term fan of the band by the time this album came out. I mean, we're talking like maybe 2 full years of listening to them. So I know some other people have expressed like, they weren't super into this album because Today's Empires was so brazen and so high octane and so over the top and in your face and like really aggressive punk and hardcore punk. So I didn't have that like mold or sound to break. And I tried to go back earlier today and listen to Fidelis to try to think, can I recall what I thought when it switches from that kind of blazing, punk track to this. And, I remember really thinking it was different, but I didn't like run against a wall hearing this for the first time.
When this record came out, would you say that you were ready for this new stylistic shift from Todd and the band? Like this is like a very, very new sound coming out on this particular track in general.
Yeah, I don't think I had a defined sound for them. I went back and bought How to Clean Everything after I got Today's Empires. And, I listened to it here and there. I didn't love it as much as I did Today's Empires, but I liked it. And so because of that, I didn't have like this set in stone thought of what I wanted them to sound like. And a lot of music I was listening to at the time did start to shift. If it was hardcore bands kind of experimenting and getting into like post-hardcore, or metalcore bands over time getting a little bit more progressive and less chuggy and less just heavy or whatever. So I was kind of already steeped in music that was exploring, the boundaries that either the scene had set for that style or band, or what they might have initially set for themselves. So I'm like, I mean, I didn't really, I don't think I thought about it. Like, short answer, I don't think I thought, hey, this is really, really different, or this is like different from how I see the band, because I was still so new to them.
Gotcha. I was completely not ready.
Right. Yeah.
I absolutely. So speculative fiction, I've said for years and years, is people be like, "Oh, what's your favorite propaganda song?" Oh, I'd probably say speculative fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Fixed Frequencies and Fidelis Hearse, which are both Chris songs, both very interesting, both very new sounding songs as far as Chris's songs go, and everything that comes before that. And then you have Cut Into the Earth and then Bringer of Greater Things. And I was so used to, like songs that from Todd before, like Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things When Fucked Up Things Become Ordinary, and New Homes for Idle Hands, and Fuck the Border. Like, I was really used to that, just like screaming straight ahead blast music like you would get later in this record, like Impending Halfhead. I was not ready for these two songs. And for years, I skipped these two songs in the car because I like the massive time signature changes and the massive like the slowdown and pace. Like, I couldn't like punch my steering wheel air drumming, you know what I mean, to these songs, because I didn't understand them. Like, I didn't understand the music, I didn't understand the structure, I didn't understand the time signatures and the pace changes, and the vocal delivery was so different that I skipped these two songs for years. And, I don't even regret skipping them because I wasn't prepared to appreciate them for what they are. But now I am, which is so exciting. So now I feel like I'm understanding these songs. I started to understand them a lot in like 2009 and 10 whenever I heard Night Letters, and I was like, whoa, Todd blows me away on Night Letters, and that's such a banger. So, but it's also different than something like Impending Halfhead. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, if you hit play from the beginning of the discography, and then listened all the way through, I think Cut Into the Earth is going to be the biggest wild card or curveball, starting from the beginning, for sure. Like, even with the first three tracks, they're different, they're a little thrashier, but I don't see too many people hearing those songs and then going like, we'll never listen to that band again. But with this one is so different, for sure.
So different. So I was not ready for these songs for years and years. And after Supporting Cast came out, I went back and I kind of gained a new appreciation for these songs and the way that Todd delivers them, almost in like a cleaner way. But like, I am really only now coming to fully appreciate this combination of songs, and holy smokes, am I so happy to be proven completely wrong for how great these two songs are together. So should we go ahead and talk about our guest on this episode?
Yeah, who do we got there, Greg?
Well, we got one David Guillas, also known as Beaver or the Beeve, who played guitar for Propaganda and joined after the release of Potemkin City Limits. So Beeve joins in the wake of the release of the record that Cut Into the Earth is on. David played on Supporting Cast. He played on Failed States. He has some songwriting credits on Victory Lap even. And, he helped elevate the band to the next level because he's like a total riff master. And then he left the band after several years to join our ranks, you and me, as a teacher of young folks in North America. So David has a classroom up in Manitoba where he teaches now, and he plays in Agassiz, the fantastic instrumental band out of Winnipeg. And it's just so awesome to have him. But you did the interview. What did you guys talk about a little bit?
We talked about how he first heard the band, how he got into playing music, this song, Cut Into the Earth, and his kind of connection with Todd and Chris.
We're going to go into our chat with David Guillas, also known as the Beeve, and we'll see you afterwards.
David, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Glad to be here.
We're super grateful to you and your time, and we're glad to have you here. Can you tell the audience who you are and a little bit about your musical trajectory and the bands that you've been in?
Okay, so yeah, I'm David Guillas. I've had the nickname Beaver since I was in high school, and most of my friends call me that, but now I'm a professional, and so mostly these days I go by David. Not to say that I would ever want my friends to call me David, because that would be weird. Anyways, I started playing guitar when I was about 14, and yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but one of the early influences on me was Propaganda as a young guitar player. And so I was in a couple of different bands going through high school. My good friend Robbie and I were in a bunch of bands, starting with Populist Manifesto, quite obviously influenced by Anti-Manifesto, by Propaganda. And Robbie named that band because he was the smart one. I didn't understand what it meant. I was just like, okay, cool, sounds good. We were in a band called Jab of the Butt. That was my name because I'm not the smart one. And then after that, after high school, formed a band with some other guys, including Robbie, called March December Swing. That's when I started playing shows locally and started connecting with other people in Winnipeg, including Chris and the other guys in Propaganda. After that, I was in a band, Giant Sons, again with Robbie. And that band was subsequently later on kind of re-released by G7 Welcoming Committee. After that, I was in a band called Rough Music, also with my good friend Robbie. And then after that, I eventually ended up in Propaganda shortly after that. And then currently I'm in a band called Agassi.
So what kind of music first got you into exploring, music as an individual, as a musician? What kind of maybe got you off the path of what maybe people might start with and go a little deeper?
I think me getting interested in guitar coincided with that 90s punk thing. So, for example, the first song I remember learning how to play was 21st Century Digital Boy, Bad Religion. Also, like Nirvana, stuff like that too. And then I really started getting into that Fat Record stuff. I mean, for 2 years, that's all I could listen to, including Propaganda. And then from there, it just, my tastes shifted constantly, meandering in and out of different genres. But Propaganda was consistent through all of that, unlike no other band, which is, I think that says something to their staying power, is, they evolved just like the rest of us evolve, right? They didn't stick with a formula that worked for high school kids like some other bands did and do, because that's what brought them success. They evolved, and so that's why I always found them interesting as an evolving guitar player, and also just as an evolving person whose tastes change.
That's such a great description, and we've heard something similar from lots of other people that we've interviewed about how their ideas and how maybe they view the world, but also kind of the later introspection kind of takes hold as we age, thinking more inward as much as we are thinking outward. So do you remember what you first heard from the band? Like what album or song, or where you were, like kind of an origin story as a fan?
I don't have a specific memory, although I can make a very good assumption. I would have probably been in my friend Robbie's mom's car. I remember he had the tape. I never had the How to Clean Everything tape, but he did. And so he would always play it. And that was my first introduction to the band. And I remember just loving that record. Some songs in particular, like Anti-Manifesto, I just thought that was the best you can get. That was the best song I had ever heard at that point in my life. It was just so good.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more, maybe in, say, like a big picture way, about the impressions the band had on you, either as a musician, as an evolving musician, as an evolving person, whether that's through the lyrics and the message, before, during, or after you were in the band?
Yeah, for sure. So I've never been a words guy. That sounds stupid, but what I mean is, when I hear music, it's not the lyrics that speak to me, at least not immediately. And I've come to really appreciate good lyrics, but it takes effort. It takes like a concentrated effort for me to listen to the lyrics and to let it make some kind of connection. It doesn't come easy. So when I was 15 years old, I didn't make that effort. So when I'm listening to a band at that age, like Propaganda, those lyrics weren't resonating with me the way I'm sure they did for many people. But they did resonate with my brother and my good friend Robbie, who I've mentioned many times already. They immediately went vegan. They immediately started reading Chomsky and all that stuff. Whereas I didn't. I was into the music, but those words didn't connect with me. And it's also partially because I'm stubbornly conservative. I didn't want anything to shake up my little world and my little status quo comfort zone. So it was more so indirectly as the years went by that those lyrics in the Propaganda songs struck a chord with me through people like my brother and my friends. And it took a few years before I started thinking critically about my own life and the way I live it. But it was very much due to those lyrics in the Propaganda songs, but it was indirectly, if that makes sense. It was sort of filtered through the people around me, because what struck me was the sounds and the music. And to this day, I think about my life from that when I was 14 or 15 until now. A Propaganda record would come out. I'd listen to it nonstop. It would influence me as a guitar player big time. And then, 4 or 5 years would go by before the next Propaganda record came out. And in that time, I was, exploring other music and other ideas. And then another record would come out, and I'm all over that, listening to it nonstop. It's influencing me all over again as a guitar player. And then another 4 or 5 years would go by. And so it's been a series of that until, of course, I joined the band. But even continuing as I was in the band, because what better way to grow and learn as a guitar player than to be in a band with one of your biggest influences as a guitar player? I grew so much just being surrounded by Chris as a guitar player, but also Jord and Todd as musicians, and being around their conversations. I miss that so much. We're still friends, but I don't see them the way I used to. And being surrounded by those, conversations in the van or conversations in the jam space, that was like the best education I ever got. All these ideas just floating around, and it really changed my life in a great way.
I totally hear what you're saying about some of the ideas with so many either songs or albums, because I see myself now as Greg and I are reading about and diving further into the lyrics. Even if it's an album that came out 18 years ago or 19 years ago, I realize I still haven't really thought about this enough, whatever idea is here, or I haven't challenged myself to either take action or to meaningfully be involved with how I'm being challenged with this music here. So it's like a process. I've realized it definitely wasn't just like some moment to where I open it up and things are different. There are all these parts about me, like you said, kind of being stubborn, maybe being chipped away. And hopefully that I could keep an open mind with whatever I might not have noticed or may not have really changed about myself when I first heard those ideas. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And with you joining the band, it's funny, Greg and I both had this on-air epiphany when we were talking about Tertium and how much you contributed to the band with that song kind of being remolded from a Giant Sons song. Yeah. And how the sound is just so drastically different in a massively positive way on supporting cast, to where we both had like the same notes written down. Like, this is an homage to the Beaver for sure. Like this song kind of just blew us away in realizing the evolution of the band and how it had changed. So we definitely doffed our hats to you on that one.
I appreciate that. That song is a Giant Sun song. It was written by myself, but also Robbie Richardson and David Kutch. But then I think credit is due to Chris to turning that song into Tertium. He's just a master songwriter and a master arranger, and he hears things and is able to sculpt songs in a way that I'm still in awe of. So he made that, and not he did, but also the band, the way the band interpreted that song is what made it that. So I do appreciate the compliment very much, but credit is due elsewhere.
Well, when we reached out to you, you mentioned Cut Into the Earth as one of your favorite Propaganda songs. So what is it about this track that stands out to you so much?
The intro, the whole song's great, but listen to that intro. And for me, that represents what I love about the band and what is one of the things that's so special about the band. Anything goes, right? There's no formula. And you listen to that intro and like, what is going on there? Time signatures are shifting. That's a song I never learned how to play because we never played it live when I was in the band, despite my constantly suggesting it for tours. And I can imagine why it's difficult. And I can appreciate the amount of effort Todd put into writing that, but not only Todd, the amount of effort and thought that Chris and George put into interpreting that, because it's like none of us are schooled musicians. That would have taken a lot of effort to understand what's happening in that intro alone. And it's just beautiful the way it weaves and it flows and it kind of starts and stops. So for me, immediately hearing that, it's like, whoa, there's something different going on here. And then it kicks into the song, and it's kind of like, I'm not sure. I said already, I'm not a words guy, but it's almost like disjointed the way the song is kind of like, what am I trying to say? Like staccato is maybe the word, which I think that would have been really difficult as a band to write and to practice and pull off in a way that doesn't sound super choppy. It sounds cohesive and it flows. Just musically, that song represents what I love about the band as a fan and also as a former member, is that anything goes. If it sounds good and if it stokes the other people in the band, let's go for it.
Yeah, I think this track marks a pretty dynamic shift in their changing sound. Like you said, the intro, you could tell right away from the music to also the change in the vocal approach from Todd. So I only started listening in like 2003 with Today's Empires. And then just 2 years later, Potemkin came out. I know it's hard to like think all the way back with a specific moment, but if I heard this chronologically, just in terms of the band's discography from like the start up into this point, this song definitely seems like an outlier in style. Like if you just sat someone down, like at the very beginning of How to Clean Everything up until this, do you remember maybe what you first thought or how you were processing it at the time after listening to this band for so long?
I think I was just ready for that as a listener. I was not stuck in 1992, nor were they. And I had grown between records. And so hearing that, it's just like, yes, that is exactly what I need to hear from this band. That's why I keep coming back and I'm constantly interested in this band. It's like, holy shit, this is complicated stuff and interesting and thoughtful. And to me, as an evolving person and as an evolving musician, I need to listen to something that I can tell someone put some thought into, right? If it sounds like somebody just farted it out, didn't put any thought into it, they're just like, oh, kids are going to like that. They're going to mosh to that. No thanks. Not interested in that. I might have been interested in that when I was 15, but not when I'm in my 30s or 40s, right?
Yeah, I noticed that the bands that I really like that put out an album every 2 to 3 years, I actually kind of don't listen to them as much anymore because typically it's the same fare. Like it might be solid and it might be really good and talented, but it's not necessarily what moves me.
But there are some bands, I think of the bands that I think are great and they have lasting staying power. It's a simple thing. They were honest and they put thought into their music. Like a band like SNFU, for example, they put thought and effort into their music and it's still good. It's still interesting. To me, that's the secret, I think, to writing good music. It's not complicated. Just be honest and put some effort and thought into it. Doesn't matter how skilled you are. Who cares if you can play a million notes or not? Just put some effort into it.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember seeing you guys in Chicago in 2007, and I ran into a friend of mine from like middle school, and we didn't know we both liked, punk and the same bands. And he kind of said like, oh yeah, Today's Empires, it's the greatest album of all time. And I was already had moved on to liking Potemkin more. So I just kind of silently nodded and just kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't want to get into a musical debate, in the pit or whatever. But I had already thought like, oh no, I clearly disagree. I like the changes that are taking place on this, even as a relatively new fan. So we have a lot of listeners who are musicians, who are in bands past and present. And you mentioned a little bit of the technical side with the time changes. Is there anything else that stands out to you as a musician that your ears might pick up that my like non-musician ears might overlook?
For me, in that intro anyways, it's the, I'm not even sure. If it sounds like there's some shifting time signatures, but I don't know. And, I have to be honest. I think the reason why that song has remained so special to me is because I don't know it's mysterious to me still. So many of those songs I know how to play because I've played them live. And so the mystery is kind of out of them, if that makes any sense. Like I realize, oh, that's what he's playing on. I know how to play that. I still love the songs, but it sort of almost ruined some of those songs for me as a fan because the mystery's gone. That song, I have no idea what's happening. I've never tried to sit down and figure it out. I've never played it. It's a mystery. So I think I like that because I get to listen to it without my musician ears, if that makes any sense. I listen to it as it's almost like I get to listen to music before I knew how to play a guitar, where it's just like you hear something and it just sounds like magic, right? Sometimes as a musician, you're like, oh, you can pick out like, okay, I can tell what he's doing on the guitar. I can hear the bass. It kind of makes sense. But I miss that feeling of being a kid and you hear music and you don't know how it was made, what instruments are being played or anything. It's just a mystery. And in a way, that song kind of still is that for me.
It kind of reminds me of a magic trick. Like once you see it performed and then you know how it's done, it takes away the mystery to it.
Yeah, you can still appreciate it on some level, but the mystery's gone.
So let's switch and talk a little bit about the ideas and the lyrics in Cut Into the Earth. So what do you like about this song in terms of the lyrics?
It's just so Todd. I mean, Todd is maybe the most earnest person I've ever met. He's just earnest and honest to the core. And that song, I've never talked to him about the lyrics of that song, but I imagine they come from personal experience. He used to volunteer at a sort of a refugee welcoming place here in Winnipeg. And I imagine he probably met a lot of people from different places in the world where life was very hard. And he heard those stories and Todd is a visceral guy. He feels things like viscerally. And that's what I hear in those lyrics. It's just that visceral empathy that he has for these families that had struggled so much. And the kind of the final lyrics in the song about the cut into the earth, right back to your back door. It kind of makes me think, how our society, our privileges externalize the cost of those privileges to the rest of the world. And we create these situations elsewhere on the planet where it becomes unlivable. And it's just so we can live this privileged life in our society. And those unlivable places, where are those people going to go? They're going to find somewhere safe, just like any of us would. And now we have these movements of refugees that are now an inconvenience, I think, to some people in our society, and I think that's what that lyric means to me, how at any moment of time, any of us could be displaced, or any of us could find where we live to be unlivable. And that's going to happen more and more, as we all know. And what would we do if we had no choice? Where would we go? And would we not want to be welcomed by the people? And how would that feel if you weren't welcomed by the people?
I think something that stands out and makes this song so memorable and successful is the way the lyrics are written from like an omniscient narrator. So Todd doesn't pretend to be able to write or perceive these things from the first person, but there's someone else watching. And I'm curious like how you see that or interpret that narrator, if it's an inner voice, if it's someone else who's made this journey as a refugee, or something else, like who the narrator might be.
I don't know. I think maybe for me, it represents just the care that Todd took. Not like he's being careful not to put words into anybody's mouth or to be a voice necessarily for anybody. It's more about sort of amplifying somebody else's story. And so I don't know, but maybe that's why he chose to have this third person narrative, just to keep it more, it's, you know, you're amplifying the story. You're not trying to co-opt somebody's voice or tell someone's story for them. I think that's my take on it.
We recently talked to David Anthony, the music writer and podcast host, and his observation was how propaganda have shifted so much from like issue and topic to human centered lyrics and themes. And I think this is a great example of that, where it's no longer about kind of a time-stamped issue, whereas, you know, like the human aspect of the lyrics, you know, that's never going to age, and that's always going to be relevant, whether that's 2005 or 2020. So I'm curious if you think there's been progress in terms of immigration and refugee policies since the song was recorded and released.
That's a tough one. I don't know. I still think it's like where I work and where I teach, we have some families that, you know, had to leave where they're from because it became an unlivable situation. And I see that it's a struggle still. I don't know if I can comment on whether or not it's improved or not. I don't think I know enough, but I can comment. To me, from what I've experienced with the people I've met, it's a struggle. It's difficult. And to not speak the language of a place that you are now calling home, and to experience indifference from the people that live here, and indifference to maybe want to help, that would be really difficult. So I think that's all I could say, is that there's many difficulties, and I think we as a society can do a lot more to support families that have to move because their homes have become unlivable, and maybe exercise some more empathy for that, and imagine what it would be like if we had to leave the place we call home. I mean, how would that feel? I mean, I think about where I live. It's a familiar place. I'm not intimidated to go out because I know how to get around. I know where to find help. Those kinds of things. What if all of a sudden I had to go for because of a situation far beyond my control? And what if I had to go somewhere where everyone just seemed indifferent to my struggles or ignorant to my struggles? They don't know what's going on, and how lonely that would feel, you know? I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of rambled, but
no, for sure. For sure. So as a fellow teacher, how do you address some of these issues that are cut into the earth in your classroom, like ideas of settler colonialism, xenophobia? Working with younger students, how do you bring these issues to your classroom in either an age appropriate way, but also as a way to try to instill and build empathy in young learners?
Well, I think everything in education comes down to relationships. This is something we were talking about before you pressed record. But relationships, not only between myself and the students, but, allowing room and freedom for the students to also develop relationships and to have conversations. And I found that, kids have this is such a cliche, but there's some truth to it. There's a purity in kids in the way that they see each other. And, I think a lot of them are starting to be, there's powerful forces at work to instill attitudes into children, but at that age, they don't go that deep. And I just see in my classroom, there's just a lot of acceptance, a lot of willingness to get to know each other and to listen to each other. There's no judgment about, where somebody's from or their own experiences. And so I think it's just about allowing room for that, allowing room for kids to just talk, without any kind of structure imposed on them. I think there's way too much structure imposed on children of a certain age, where, they're expected to comply instead of expected to relate to each other and to empathize with each other. And so I think that's a starting point. I'm not an expert. I'm a young, early teacher. I'm by no means, I'm still experimenting with what works and what doesn't, and I'm still learning. But I think that's my guiding principle, is relationships and allowing room for relationships to grow and develop between the students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So did your understanding or appreciation of the song change at all after joining the band and then becoming familiar and friends and colleagues with Todd and the other members?
Yeah, musically it did. Just knowing the writing process and knowing how difficult at times it can be for whoever brings in an idea, how difficult it can be for the other members to first of all understand that idea and interpret it and to make it work on their own respective instruments. I can appreciate what the three of them went through to make the intro of Cut Into the Earth work. As musicians, I can appreciate the effort and thought that it took and the determination, because that wouldn't have been easy, I don't imagine, for them to accomplish.
Before we go, are there any musical projects or anything else that people can check out online or elsewhere?
Well, currently I'm in a band called Agassi. We're an instrumental trio. We have an album out that's available on vinyl and also on all the usual streaming download places. And we also released about a year ago 2 songs, like a EP or whatever you want to call it, that are just available for download. So you can visit. We have a website. I'm terrible at this. I don't even know what the website is. Google Agassi Band Winnipeg, and you might find it.
Well, David, thank you so much for being here, for talking to us, and we look forward to having you back on the podcast.
Great. Thanks very much.
Well, that was our chat with David Guillas. What a pleasure. David, thank you again for coming on the show. What a fantastic fella. I'm pretty darn glad he's a teacher, aren't you, Keith?
Yeah, hearing his thoughts and just chatting with him about trying to promote and foster creativity in his classroom and not, working to establish complacency or compliance, and seeing someone who's so talented and who has so many skills. Like, if you see him on social media,
he builds
guitars out of like old furniture.
Yeah.
And I am so blown away by the amount of knowledge and practical skills needed to be able to do so, that I imagine how successful and how powerful his lessons have to be in taking like his personal skills and abilities, and then like just connecting with young people. I mean, it feels pretty awesome to share a profession with them.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Well, let's get into Cut Into the Earth. Do you think we should go ahead and start with the music this time around?
Yeah, why not? Since the music is so different and it's going to be one of those curveballs, like I said, I think that'd be a good place to start.
What instrument would you like to start with on our discussion about the music tonight?
I mean, the drums, right? The drum intro that starts off the song, I think, is so iconic, and my brain starts playing the rest of the music instantly as soon as I hear that drum intro. And I know you already mentioned time signatures, so I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, lately I've been digging into some of the books that the publishing company Sheet Happens Music put out, where they transcribe all the music of Propaganda. So I've been kind of digging into this, and I can't really say that I understand these things very well. However, whenever I find time signatures listed in these books for these Propaganda songs, what I've been doing is going on YouTube and taking YouTube music lessons from drummers who show you and demonstrate how to perform a beat in, say, something like 9/8 time signature. Okay, so this is a wild song time signature wise. I was looking through the Sheet Happens book, and it starts in 6/8 time signature, and then it switches back and forth between 9/8, which adds an eighth note on top of a 4/4 beat, and 6/8 a couple times, so it goes back and forth. From a minute 14, it's in 4/4, which accents on the first of every four, and then switches to 2/4 time signature, which accents on the first of every two a few times to finish off the riff. And then there's a little part at 2:55, which is in 3/4 time, with 3 beats in a bar, and then it goes back to 4/4, which accents on the first 4 of every bar. And then the switching to 2/4 a couple times. So, I mean, it's wild. And then after that, it switches between 6/8, 4/4, and 2/4, which is an accent on the first of every two, like I said. So I wonder if this incredible variation in time signatures within this 4-minute song or whatever it is contributes to this song never being played live. I can't find a single video of the band playing this song live.
Yeah, me neither.
And we asked Beav, and he said that he never learned it. And I sent Sue Lynn an email, and I asked Sue Lynn if they'd ever learned it, and they said no. So this is not a song that Propagandy is currently doing. And I'm like, okay, well, clearly they could do it, probably. But, like, is this one, like, just too weird, too hard? I'm not sure. Is this a song that, like, they've never had a request for somebody to play it live, so they've just, like, left it out because they just assume no one wants to hear it? But it is a wild time signature song. And so, you know, I was researching a little bit on how bands pull off songs like this in a studio session to where they are able, because you can't just set a click track going a single speed and then just play to that the whole time through. On a song like this, you just can't do that because it doesn't work. It switches so many times. So what I found out is that bands can play to a mapped out click that's pre-programmed by a producer or a member of the band. And then, so it's like a map of the song in a series of bleeps and bloops. So it's like bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop, bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop. And then it would change tempo. So every time it changes tempo, there's a new series of click tracks. So instead of bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop, bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop, it would be like bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop. And it would just change speed based on the time signature that part of the song is played in. So what the producer or the engineer or the band would do is they would pre-program a custom-made click track that you can play over the top of as like a song map. And I'm wondering if this is one of those types of songs where there was like a pre-made click map where they created it during the demoing process and then made the click. And then when they went into the studio to lay down the official tracks, that they had this pre-mapped out click track that they played over the top of. So I'll be investigating that as I learn a little bit more about the studio process. As we continue to make this podcast, I'm going to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, I am, of course, not a musician. And when you were describing the time signatures, I didn't understand anything.
Yeah, you were waving your arms.
Sheet happens. That was the last thing I really got.
Yeah, going on YouTube and like watching people play something in 9/8 and explain why it's 9/8, which you just know adds an eighth note on top of a 4/4 beat at the end. So instead of playing 8 hits on the hi-hat, you do 9 before you go back into the beat. And so I totally recommend everybody out there go and watch demonstrated drum videos of drummers playing in different time signatures and explaining why it's in that time signature, because it will make so many of these songs make a ton more sense if you want to go a little bit deeper into understanding the music behind it.
And even with the click track, what you were explaining, the opening still doesn't have this rigid or necessarily like, you know, studio perfection sound to it. It's still very loose.
It feels organic, but you know it's perfect time.
Yeah, and I definitely mean that as a compliment, that it is so unusual in its sound that it feels like it's played live almost. Like you're hearing them live through the speakers, and it's not just something that they've necessarily taken the best version of of each track or each instrument and then layered it to make sure it's all perfect, it has just this very, very real, like you said, organic sound to it.
Yeah, and I would imagine that they played to a pre-programmed click on this, but like I can't really be sure. I don't know what the recording was like in early 2005 when they made this, but they're such masters of performance and perfection in their studio recordings that there's probably something that they were doing behind the scenes in order to absolutely nail these time signature changes, because it's just so hard. It's just so hard to do that, and it's a challenge that I don't know if I'd be up for.
Yeah, so I mentioned that drum intro, then you kind of broke down some other details. And I think the guitar and the bass that come in just add these really unique layers. And like the Beef said, it's sort of jazzy. There are those fluttery, ringing melodies, and the bass just seems really prominent. It seems
Yeah.
really high up in the mix and just really loud and in your face, which I love.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't really follow the drums like at all. But again, I definitely mean that as a compliment. And, there are parts that accentuate the melodies. There are other times where it seems like Jord is filling in some of the open space of the song, which you wouldn't really have on their earlier discography. And then there are parts with like these really unique transitions. And then especially kind of once the song opens up with like It's All Starting Again, I think just all of the instruments evolve and change. And it's very much like a journey itself.
Yeah, the bass performance in that intro is so beautiful, and for me, like I have different ways that like I appreciate performed music on records, and for me today, I listened to this album in headphones a couple times. I listened to it when I was out running. I listened to it when I was raking in my backyard, and then I put on the LP tonight, and I cranked my stereo amp to about 75 out of 100, and just it's track 1 on side B of the double LP from G7 Welcoming Committee. So you just put that needle on, and then it's like ba boom, 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 and it's just that drum intro for Cut Into the Earth is the first track that hits you on that side of the LP, and it was so loud and so clear, and that bass is so prominent and forward in the mix, like you said. It's my favorite way I've ever heard it, is on the vinyl, on the double LP, cranked up, like super loud, 75 out of 100, and it just like blew me away today. I just loved it. I love that doing this, we're hearing these songs for, in new ways, that we're paying attention to things that we maybe never had done before. But we got to talk about this guitar, man. The guitar. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned already that there are not live videos of them playing, and not only are there not live videos, there are no covers that I could find.
Wow.
And I'm a very visual person. I have friends who can hear some melodic death metal band and learn it by ear. And not only can I not learn it by ear, I don't even really understand it by ear. So
Yeah.
I need to kind of see things played out to have a little bit better of an understanding. And especially just for more intricate music to kind of see how intricate it is. And, unfortunately, I couldn't really find any, visual and visible versions of this song. But I just love how, like, the part of the riff that Chris is playing in the intro seems to, again, change and be reused when the song gets heavier. It kind of its sonic quality evolves, but it doesn't sound the same. But it seems like there's like this skeleton of a riff or a few riffs in the intro that are reused throughout the rest of the song, which I don't think I ever really noticed before until I really sat down and listened on repeat.
Yeah, so I want to talk specifically about the solos in this song, the guitar solos. These are, so there's like 2 distinct sections that I'm talking about. And the guitar solos on this song are some of the most expressive guitar performances in the Propaganda catalog, in my opinion. They're not like shreddy, they're not super riffy, but there's these two moments that Chris like howls, like these howling guitar solos that like they scream. Like these are like personified guitar solos of like human screaming to me. And in this song, these are probably some of my favorite guitar recordings on any Propaganda record, on any record at all. Is so what these guitar solos signify to me is the shrieking of human helplessness performed through a guitar. The guitar solo on this song emulates a human being knelt over the body of a dead loved one who was a civilian casualty in like some kind of atrocity. So imagine like a building whose facade has been blown off by a drone strike and somebody survives, but one of the people in the house doesn't. And you just kneel over that body and then you take in what has happened and then you wail, you shriek. And I don't know what this feels like. But you know, that to me is what these guitar solos are doing, is they are the primal wail that emanates from a human's guts when a sadness is so profound, so without words, that all that can happen is to wail from the depths of your guts. And that's what they captured me. And I have no idea how Chris did this, but wow. These guitar solos are human screaming from the depths of sadness. Like that's all that they are to me. And I mean, I don't know how to explain it other than that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's actually just the guitar solos doing that, but the chaotic tempo, like the rising and fall of the bass, you know, so there's that transition right after, during Leave the Shots echoing behind, and it picks up the tempo. And I mean, like I said, this song feels like a journey. It has all these different parts. Some are hurried and desperate. Others are slow and careful, while others are like pleading, you know, for recognition and help. And I think it perhaps just as well or better than, you know, the best Propaganda songs, where the musical composition reflects the lyrical and thematic qualities in a way that, I mean, I kind of had this epiphany sitting on my balcony earlier, drinking a beer, like, this has hit me really hard in a song that I've loved for 15 years. And something else with the guitar too, it seems to have like a flanger effect. And I could be wrong, I'm not like a gear head at all, but there's like this sort of moving, whooshing sound that stands out to me, that I think continues to build on this theme of movement and uncertainty.
Yeah. What do you think about Todd's vocal delivery, the way that he incorporates a cleaner approach as opposed to his previous outputs with I Spy, you know, and the earlier Propaganda stuff?
I love his clean vocals, and it reminds me of a quote from, I don't remember who said it, but someone was describing Jimi Hendrix, and it said something like, you know, Jimi Hendrix wasn't the best singer, right? But you believed whatever he sang.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it didn't matter if he was, you know, classically trained or had taken vocal lessons or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like the same reason people like or dislike, you know, Bob Dylan. It's just like that the voice is able to carry and convey the lyrics. And I love this style of Todd's more kind of post-hardcore or more melodic. I mean, I love the bangers, I love the hardcore punk songs, but these here I think are just so unique, and nothing much sounds like it.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting? Like when I listen to When All Your Fears Collide and Negredo from Victory Lap, I feel like those songs are so perfect tonally for that Victory Lap record, because Chris's songs have taken on, like they've gone in a new direction melodically, I think, into Victory Lap. And I feel like Todd's two songs on that record really fit in super well. And I almost feel like Bringer of Greater Things and Cut into the Earth and Negredo and When All Your Fears Collide are like four songs, like peas in a pod.
Yeah. And I said, like, I think, how this song transitions and how many different parts there are. The music under Don't Try to Imagine What's Ahead, again, it shifts. There's like this rhythmic complexity, but it's also memorable, and especially like paired with those lyrics. And it picks up again, like you said, that somber solo. And then it has a little bit more of a straightforward feel, and those like fluttery hammer-on riffs return. And again, I just can't wrap my mind around how well Propaganda take a riff or some musical idea and then either reuse it or reform it, and it ends up like fitting different purposes throughout the song that it's in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. Do you have any more music thoughts and performance before we dive into the lyrics?
I wish I could go back and listen to this one again for the first time from
Man,
like
no
the
kidding.
music side of it. And I was I don't know, I was a sophomore in college, junior in college, something like that, and I drove my car down to the Barnes and Noble in Bloomington, Indiana, and on the day this came out, and bought it at Barnes and Noble, and must have been driving around campus with my T-tops off, blasting the song. And I loved it then. I love it now, and I feel like even if I don't get the technical side of it, I definitely still appreciate it, and appreciate it even more.
Yeah, in 2004 and 5, I was listening to a Wilhelm Scream mute print and Strung Out, Exile, and Oblivion, like above all. Like those were like my mountaintop records of those couple of years. And so that's why I think I wasn't in a place to really accept what these two songs, Cut Into the Earth and Bringer of Greater Things, had to offer. I think I was so stylistically still in that fast equals amazing, heavy, like it's got to be heavy and it's got to be fast and it's got to rip. And so I think that was one of my problems whenever it came to this, is I just wasn't ready for it. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't musically willing to expend any effort to understand what was happening. It was just beyond me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So before we get into the lyrics, I want to point out something that I discovered today, which I had completely forgotten about. So I have the G7 edition of the vinyl, which came out as a double LP. I'm not sure if the insert of what I'm about to read was included in the Fat Wreck reissue vinyl, but on the inside of the double LP, I'm holding it up here, there's this two-sided handout that today when I opened up the LP, this fell out, and I forgot it was even in there. But this is a note. It says, "Message from the Rod." And so I pulled it out and I was like, holy smokes, it's like a note from Todd on the inside of the double LP. And I want to read it because it's so cool for understanding Todd's lyrical mindset for this record. And people might not even know this thing exists. So this is what it says. Message from the Rod. I think many of the books below have had some influence on my lyrics for this record. The problems of Africa have become cliché here in the West. This is absurd to me, as every single country in Africa is different and interesting on its own. Many have suffered endlessly at the hands of Western corporations, quote-unquote explorers, slave traders, missionaries, corrupt officials, and armies. To read about Africa is to get a firmer grasp on how the world truly works, and is also a good way to understand failed states, genocide, world imbalances, and disasters. I think if we read and care and make the continent more familiar to ourselves, we will find that there is a lot of really good shit going on, and a lot of rockin' tunes. Side note, my friend Vicky Brennan, who researches Yoruba music in Western Africa, like so cool. Like I have friends that like research as academics and write about Western African music, and it's so cool. Anyway, back to the note. A lot of rockin' tunes, and maybe we will not think that suffering is just the way it is in a place that seems like it's on another planet. A new world can open up to us if we take the time to look. Everyone will be better off for it. I spent about 2 years writing a song for this record about the Rwandan genocide. It never quite came together as I'd hoped, and doesn't appear here. Maybe it will see the light of day in the future. Instead of the song, please check out these books. And so he has a list of books here. The books are We Did Nothing by Linda Pullman, Human Cargo, A Journey Among Refugees by Caroline Moorhead, A Continent for the Taking, The Tragedy and Hope of Africa by Howard French, King Leopold's Ghost by Adam Hochschild, Me Against My Brother at War in Somalia, Sudan, and Rwanda by Scott Peterson, Conspiracy to Murder by Linda Melvern, The Graves Are Not Yet Full by Bill Berkeley, This House Has Fallen, Nigeria in Crisis by Carl Mayer, Machete Season, The Killers Speak in Rwanda by Gene Hatzfeld, In the Land of Magic Soldiers by Daniel Bergner, and Shake Hands with the Devil by Romeo Dallaire, which I actually have sitting on my shelf right next to me. So that's a really cool note from Todd on the inside of this record about seeking to understand the plight of lives and people in other countries around the world that are, people in the West are so quick to judge by looking at news coverage or whatever, without also failing to recognize the roles that our places that we live have to do with suffering in other places, and how we are so often quick to cause things and then blame the effects of those causes on people who are stuck in places that we have totally devastated in many ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Greg, I originally had this idea of for this discussion detailing America's somewhat oscillating migration policies, a timeline of how our collective ire has, wax and wane whenever it best fits our economic needs, like railroad companies supporting Chinese immigration when, they wanted workers they could exploit, or Irish Americans being on the receiving end of anti-Catholic rhetoric. But, just a timeline that seemed a little too clinical or sterile. So instead, I hope to interject and inject a number of different literary references that I think will help, build and enrich this discussion, because Todd's lyrics are so beautiful and visual and haunting. And the first thing that comes to mind listening to Cut into the Earth is part of a poem by Richard Wright, who is the author of Native Son, who detailed the movement of African Americans from the South to the northern states in the early 20th century. And he said, "I was leaving the South to fling myself into the unknown. I was taking a part of the South to transplant in alien soil, to see if I could grow differently, if it could drink of new and cool rains, bend in strange winds, respond to the warmth of other suns, and perhaps to bloom." And man, that line, the warmth of other suns, I can't help but think of America, and clearly propaganda. You see Canada as the same way, as a false beacon of hope.
Absolutely.
We like to see ourselves as a refuge for those, seeking something better, but not only something better, but somewhere where individuals could just survive. And I really have to kind of question that labeling and that self-labeling that we like to bestow on ourselves as a country.
Yeah, and the warmth of other suns was recently, used in another book by Isabel Wilkerson, a historian in the United States who documents this the actual migration process from the South to the North, the urbanization of the rural African American South into the urban North. Isabel Wilkerson's book, The Warmth of Other Suns, is an astonishing portrait of a massive migration and population flux that happened post-Civil War, into the 1940s and 50s, and is an absolutely stellar piece of work. So that story that Wright started out with in that poem has been documented as a 550-page volume of history that came out a couple of years ago now, and is well worth reading. I read it in probably 2015 or 16, and I loved every single page. The stories found within are absolutely stunning, and Wilkerson did an incredible job.
So let's start with the first lyric, Greg. What comes to mind?
Oh boy. Is this life to stand here and wait? Okay, so this line captures everything. This is something that every single person can relate to, right? Is this life to stand here and wait? And it captures the most mundane to the most excruciating aspects of life. Waiting with uncertainty. If someone is on their deathbed, how long? If someone's plane is delayed and you're stuck at a gate, how long? If the world is struggling through a pandemic, how long do we have to wait? If you're going to a new place, how long is it going to take to get there? If you're waiting for an important piece of paperwork to arrive to say that you're quote unquote legitimate at something, how long until that paperwork arrives? How long until your transcript arrives at your new job or your new certification agency or whatever? If you're waiting for an important bank transfer of money that you need, how long? Being completely at the mercy of someone else's ability to fulfill something necessary quickly is one of the most banal, horrifying, and frustrating experiences of being alive. I think this line is so utterly human in a way that so many people can relate to. And I think it's the perfect hook to a song that's about something much, much deeper to come. What do you think?
Yeah, what a powerful attention grabber. I think, when is the right time for people to flee war or famine or persecution? And how long must refugees or exiles and asylum seekers wait for the quote unquote developed world to care about anything other than itself?
Yeah.
And, when will it be when multinational corporations stop polluting land and superpowers no longer destabilize entire regions, and the promise of progress isn't dangled above the collective heads of entire populations. And then switching into in this city forged of scraps, is this life to stand on the dead, on feces and sweat? Is this life? So I have two mental images here. Like, one is a city slum, since more than half of the global population now lives in cities. I think it was as of 2014, and the urban population of the world has grown from something like 750 million in 1950 to 4.2 billion in 2018. And by 2050, the UN expects the urban population to grow to 66%. And so I see like an urban slum, but also refugee camps. And just looking at some numbers, according to the UN Refugee Agency, there are 795 million forcibly displaced people worldwide at the end of 2019. 45 million internally displaced people, 4.2 million asylum seekers. Like 1% of the world's population is displaced, meaning they're not living where they would want to live. 80 this people in countries affected by food insecurity. So these are all statistics that can't convey the dread and fear and uncertainty of being disconnected from your home, your loved ones, the geographic places that that define who and what we are. And Ishmael Bea wrote in
Love
A
him.
Long Way Home, memoirs of a boy soldier who was a child soldier in Sierra Leone. He said, one of the unsettling things about my journey, mentally, physically, and emotionally, was that I wasn't sure when or where it was going to end. And, maybe right now, you mentioned the pandemic, but what if it were every aspect of our lives? We didn't know when that was going to end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's that visual as well in this city forged of scraps is this life to stand on the dead. I am like conjuring up like the scene that Todd is writing about in these lyrics. So like in the opening comment that I gave, I was like all these like banal things that we wait for, right? But then he like punches you in the face, like these people are dead and you're standing on them and the city is scraps, right? So here's what I'm visualizing. Line 2 hits, and now the waiting takes on an entirely new meaning. I picture like the front of a building blown off by a car bomb or a drone strike. I see houses in my mind, perhaps in Syria or Yemen or Baghdad or the Gaza Strip, that are like dollhouse cutaways where like the front of the building is removed and you can see all the rooms inside with the furniture exposed, the belongings pouring over the edge of like a shattered concrete facade with rebar like bent everywhere. Perhaps someone died inside the house. Perhaps their body's buried under the rubble, inaccessible to rescue. City is under siege. The former occupants of the home who survived, maybe they're like a successful dentist and a shop
Mhm.
owner and a child. Do you know what I mean? So like
Mhm.
that's what I'm visualizing when I read this second line of this song, where these people who live these totally normal lives, who just did normal stuff every single day, just like me,
Mm.
now all of a sudden they are standing on the dead of their city that all of a sudden has
Mm.
like been reduced to rubble, and everything they knew is now gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then it's all starting again. Quick, gather your belongings and go. Run while it's still dark. Like, I think, what would you grab, and what would you leave behind, and would it matter? Like, think about the things right now that you think that you couldn't live without. For me, it's my books, records, family photos, those sort of things that I obsess about in the moment. But how much would I really care if I couldn't find food, or if the government killed my family and friends?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think about the song "Leave the Shots Echoing Behind, Don't Look Back Till You're Running Out of Land," and like this line elicits terror, sheer terror in me.
Mhm.
And there's no reason that I should be sitting here talking about a song like this instead having been born in a place where I would run for my life. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I didn't do anything special to be born where I was born when I was born. I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it. I was born no differently than anybody else who's born into circumstances all around the world completely beyond their control. And so, like, I was running today, like out on a run for
Mhm.
for personal enjoyment and fitness purposes, and "Leave the Shots Echoing Behind, Don't Look Back Till You're Running a Land" was playing while I was just running in my neighborhood. And, I get to run for pleasure instead of running in fear of
Mhm.
my life. And that was like heavy on my mind today when I was like just out there, you know, bloop, like jaunting around like an idiot, just like do, listening to my propaganda CD on my iPhone with my Bluetooth headphones, and thinking about how I'm just running for the hell of it, and people literally run so they don't get murdered in, when their country is being under siege by many different variables and many different circumstances.
Yeah, I want to go back then to the lyric "Out here, you're as good as dead," and
Oh
how
yeah.
how we are so quick to place judgment on other people when they're making journeys to not just better their lives, but to just have a life. And so there's a British white writer and poet who was born in Kenya, Worcestershire. And in her poem "Home," I have a few excerpts. It says, "No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well." And later she writes, "No one leaves home unless home chases you. Fire under your feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burnt threats into your neck." And then later, "You have to understand that no one puts their child in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck, feeding on newspaper, unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison, because prison is safer than a city on fire."
I just have no words to respond to that. I don't know what it feels like, but I know for a fact that if those words are coming out of a person's mouth or pen, that is a person who deserves a new start.
Hmm.
There's no doubt in my mind. And anybody who would say, well, but in response to those words, is a boring, vicious, cruel-hearted person. I just can't. I can't. I can't bend on that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And Todd's ability to convey this experience, and obviously it's informed by his, steeping himself in the writings and experiences of refugees. The line, "The current can decide how the night will end." I don't think it's necessarily sung in a way that, like, I couldn't hear that and just tell exactly what he says. So I think for the longest time I wasn't actually sure what that line was, but that gives me full body shivers, right?
Mm,
It brings tears to my eyes because my life has never teetered on something that I couldn't control like that, like an unpredictable undertow,
yeah.
or the speed of the water that I'm in trying to escape, whatever is threatening me. And that line is that is so powerful.
And I wonder, like, if Todd was talking to somebody who, told him a story like that stuck with him. But that is, I mean, I can't think of anything scarier than to be
Mhm.
in a dinghy in a blow up boat, trying to cross a river, and an unpredictable current happens, and all of a sudden the boat flips and it's pitch black outside. It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and you just reach your arm out trying to grab onto something, anything,
Mhm.
and then the water just carries you away. And these things happen all the time. We look at these pictures that get published in
Right.
our media outlets of toddlers face down on Greek beaches, and we're like, oh, they were breaking the law. And like I have zero ability to understand um, how somebody who has never once had a hungry day, never once been afraid, never once been the victim of severe violence, how people like that have the ability to have the gall and the nerve to say that people who go through struggles like that don't belong. And
Mhm.
basically what they're saying is, you don't belong on planet Earth. You don't belong the freedom to seek a safe place to live. And I just don't want to know people like that anymore. Life
Mhm.
is too short to surround myself with people who would um, say, well, you shouldn't break the law. No, I'm done with that. I am done. And this is what this song makes me think about. And like today I was like researching like refugee resettlement programs in Buffalo. And I was like, I need to do something, damn it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it made me feel pathetic. And
Mhm.
that's a huge point of respect that I have for Todd, is that I know that he's been doing work like this for years and years, for Winnipeg's refugee resettlement programs, and I just have like a tremendous amount of respect for him for that.
Yeah, and I think what I struggle with, and if it's not the people who say, well, come the right way or the legal way or whatever, the normalization of the boats that capsize, and for us, it's like another version or the newest incident of that happening, and then it's just so easy for us to kind of move on. Whereas them, I mean, that's their life,
Yeah,
right? That's everything, about their experience. It is that single experience is now, who they are. And it's just so hard to even put yourself in those shoes. And when Todd sings, "Don't try to imagine what's ahead, let nothing cripple your will. You will cross enormous distance only to arrive with nothing. You will give all you have." And that reminds me of the book Enrique's Journey, about a teenager from Honduras who seeks who sets out to find his mother in the U.S. He's got like no money. He has like a piece of paper with a phone number, and I kind of can't help but think what, again, quote unquote, illegal things you would do to find your family member. And the journalist Sonia Nazario, who wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning collection of articles about his experience, and which was later adapted into the book, she said, "Although I often felt exhausted and miserable, I knew I was experiencing only an iota of what migrant children go through. The journey gave me a glimmer of how hard this is for them."
Yeah, and that line as well. Don't try to imagine what's ahead. Let nothing cripple your will. You will cross enormous distance, only to arrive with nothing. You will give all you have. I'm not even going to try and downplay the power of that, but like I'm going to also talk about it in a totally practical manner too.
Mhm.
So say that you do escape, right? So say my Syrian dentist or my Iraqi dentist who left after the facade of their house was blown off. Say they get out, right? Say this person's 40 years old and they've been a dentist for 15 years. So the experience of being a refugee would be one of like terror and total uncertainty, but there's nothing to go back to. Like the dental office is gone, right? So there's nothing to go back to. Nowhere to go back to, no life, no office, no house. The house is blown up, the dental office is blown up. And when the lyric "you will give all you have" comes in, it really hits me because if we take my hypothetical example of this dentist who lived in a house where the facade was blown off and then runs for their life, are they likely to get to be a dentist again in the place that they wind up living down the line? Whoever takes them in? No. Like, do you think a person who was a dentist in Baghdad is going to be given medical and dental credentials to practice dentistry in the United States? Of course not, right? They're going to be told their credentials are uncertifiable and they'll wind up delivering for Grubhub or driving a taxi, which is good work and hard work. I mean, I deliver for Shipt for Target when I can find the time to do it, and it's hard and grueling work. But to have a skilled dentist go to waste because they were unlucky enough to be a dentist in a place where a war broke out and then wind up being a Grubhub driver, that's giving all one had, I would say. You know what I mean? But if it's that or be shot or blown up, I guess Grubhub it is,
Yeah, and then Todd does something profound in that he turns the mirror, I
Yes.
think, on us.
It's my
He
favorite
says,
part. I love it.
"This is absolutely this lyric moves me so much." He says, "If you navigate your way with endurance and success, if you pass the obstacles and still have your life, if you've escaped death, if your guts haven't withered away, if you haven't broken under the strain, they won't be welcoming. They forget a time when their land was swelling." So after everything, famine, war, chaos, and destruction in your home, after the journey of corrupt cops and border agents, murderous bandits and thieves who exploit the migrants, the indifferent elements, right? The rushing waters and the barren deserts, the criminal, political, judicial, and environmental barriers. Once you finally make it to wherever like this destination is, since it's not actually planned, wherever you're going to be mocked, you're going to be turned away, you're going to be dehumanized, your suffering, your struggles, and your endurance are all going to be reduced to some isolationist, racist campaign promise to win over voters who can't imagine what life is like for people who don't know where they're going to sleep next or when their next meal is going to be.
Yeah, they're props and they're used on campaign speeches, and it's sickening. And that line couldn't be more poignant for me. Nobody deserves to be born where they are. And I know that I keep saying this and I sound like a broken record, but it's pure chance. It's total luck. You are not special in where you're born. Some people are born into utter wealth and opulence, the likes of which nobody can even conceive of. And some people are born into a war zone. And this line, this line to be like reveals the usually suspect ways we look at people who are born in other places that are less lucky. And that's all it is luck. People who are anti-refugee to me are among the least compassionate, most selfish, most paranoid, and most boring people on planet Earth. People who are refugees are tremendously unlucky people. If I were so unlucky, how would I want to be treated? But if we just look at the data, we can see the trend of being less welcoming in the numbers. It's not even hypothetical. All you got to do is go to the State Department and look in the numbers. So in 2009, So let's see, between 1999 and 2016, the average annual influx of refugee acceptance in the United States was 70 to 91,000 people per year. And which for decades, we've been the highest refugee resettlement acceptance nation in the world. We no longer are, for very obvious reasons. So in 2009, we had 70,000 refugees. In 2012, we had 80,000. In 2015, we had 70,000. In 2016, we had 84,994. And then in 2018, we had 22,000. The first 7 months of 2019 were 14,000. So we plummeted. We're no longer the leader in world refugee resettlement programs, which slaps the face of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights of freedom to move and freedom of seek a safe place to live. We are slapping in the face the human rights charters that we could potentially be a leader on, but we're not. And it's real sad to me.
And then Todd comes back in with another just incredibly powerful visual, a monstrous moving across the sea when she relieved her bowels all over the world. I mean,
That's
I
awesome,
imagine
isn't it?
here, I use a lot of political cartoons in my classroom, and I think of the image of England as an octopus here, something like a dozen tentacles, all with a hand grasping on some land in hopes of, seeking to control it. And I think Todd inverts the imagery of European immigration. It's not some textbook friendly, positive image of we're a nation of immigrants, but he has this visual here of a bloated and sick continent defecating on the rest of the world's population.
Yeah. And that relieved bowels all over the world part is so great because it basically says, look at this giant dump we took all over every culture, language, spirituality, cuisine, and more. And then if you look at the LP, there's another element that Todd brings in. He quotes Red Cloud from the Sioux in the LP lyric book in the caption just underneath the song lyrics that reads, "They made us many promises, more than I can remember, but they never kept but one. They promised to take our land, and they took it." And this line included in the lyric booklet switches the perspective of the song and offers like a new dimension, offers multiple readings into this song about what one group, white Europeans, did when they were immigrants themselves. And they committed monstrous acts. But if we look at the effects of refugees in our lands today, there's tangible community benefits when resettlement and welcoming is done. So like some white folks, possibly like the ultra rich or the people who buy the bill of goods the ultra rich sell to them on cable TV, they tend to look askance at refugees who arrive here and desire to keep them out without taking into consideration the massive dump their ethnic group perpetrated on First Nations populations, where we now look with suspicion against unlucky people looking for a new place to live. And it's a deep, sickening irony that is immensely difficult to explain to anti-refugee voters in ways that I have been unsuccessful in explaining to the anti-refugee voters in my life.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of bring it to the very last line here. Don't try to imagine what's ahead. Let nothing cripple your will. Just follow the paths that they cut into the earth, right back to their door. And that last line is so incredible. And I think it conveys the hypocrisy the song is addressing so well. Like, and that hypocrisy, I don't think is anything new. Like people love saying, this isn't us, this isn't America. But even a sliver of knowledge of U.S. history, of how the U.S. has treated everyone it doesn't consider to be real Americans or, doesn't think deserve to be here, our restrictive policies all the way back to the Alien and Sedition Acts, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Immigration Act of 1924, where like 2% of the total number of people of each nationality in the U.S. In the 1890 census were allowed to migrate to the U.S., meaning that Great Britain, Ireland, and Germany accounted for 70% of all available visas, all the way up until Donald Trump's Muslim ban. It's not new.
No.
What he did wasn't un-American or, unique. It fits in completely with the rest of U.S. history.
Oof. Yeah, and that's a hard truth for a lot of people, which they will continue to ignore as we approach the upcoming election as well. But did you notice that Don't Try to Imagine What's Ahead is a recurring chorus-like part of this song? Did you notice that there's sort of a chorus in this tune?
Mm-hmm.
I love that because there's not a ton of choruses in later propaganda songs, and it's really awesome. All right. Well, Keith, that was really heavy. And, I hope people find that discussion interesting whenever considering this song. Did you find any commentary on YouTube that you would like to share?
Yeah, some people obviously agree with us in that one person on YouTube said, super underrated propaganda song.
Is this the most underrated propaganda song? Is they don't play it live.
Yeah, right.
The two second guitarists who have been in the band since 2005 and 2006 never learned it. There are no covers. There are no guitar playthrough videos. Is this the most underrated propaganda song?
It's definitely seems like the least discussed or the least out there track.
Yeah. Somebody else on YouTube wrote, definitely, I wish they would play this one live. I love the jazzy intro. That's pretty cool. Here's another one I found. This album came out when I moved away from home and was a lonely, knows nobody student when doing my master's in a huge city. It saved my ass. I'd just get in a random bus and listen to Potemkin City Limits over and over all night. The lesson to any non-migrant here: when life is throwing opportunities at you, don't get scared and go for it, or else you'll feel as sad as this song can feel, or as bad as some guy who does everything right and lands up somewhere with a PhD and still feel like they're hated by everybody. When they walk outside in that faraway land, they ended up by following the paths they cut into the earth.
Wow.
Holy smokes. And you know what? That one really resonates with me because I've been an immigrant. I lived in Mexico. I lived in the UK. I've lived in Canada. I spent some time in Hawaii, and I've moved around. I live in Buffalo now. I've only lived here for 2 years, and I still feel that tremendous loneliness of knowing that the people I've known my whole life are very far away in almost all circumstances. But I didn't move to any of the places that I moved because of a violent act. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I never ran for my life. I was never scared. But I also tremendously empathize with people who do move to places, who do need something different. And even though mine wasn't born out of violence, mine was born out of tremendous privilege.
Yeah, same. Dude, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. You can't get luckier than that.
Yeah. And but those experiences of being on the other side of the wall
right.
are transformative in every way in how you view humanity and how you view the experiences and the variations of people's life experiences. So hats off to that YouTube commenter, because that just punched me in the heart real hard.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. What about final teachable moments, Greg? What do you got?
Well, how do we treat the unluckiest among us? Do we scowl and dig in with Muslim bans, or continue to gut our refugee resettlement programs to the State Department? Or do we build up and embrace as fellow humans the unluckiest among us? I know where we're headed, and I don't like it one bit. As a nation, we are continuing to commit the greatest hypocritical acts by denying the validity and humanity of the unluckiest among us. And this song makes me want to change professions almost in a way into getting into the world of refugee resettlement, or at least do some volunteering. I mean, this is some inspirational stuff.
Yeah, visually, I kind of right now think about Justin Santora's image of, the border wall with a crack and a sunlight shining through, and a plant growing in the shade of this immense wall. And Greg, I also think about my students, refugees from Yemen who I'd find in class. I'd find in class looking at their village on Google Earth, displaced from a conflict that their classmates couldn't tell you a single thing about. I think about spending hours at my library teaching English classes to immigrants, trying to anticipate the challenges they'd face, giving them like working knowledge of a language, but also tips and skills that they could use if they face danger. And I'd think about how they're vilified with empty memes like they're taking our jobs while escaping the devastation wrought by like the earthquakes in Nepal, living in a motel, how little we're willing to grant other people, and feeling embarrassed standing in front of a classroom full of accomplished adults in their home countries, each with beautiful and inspiring stories, all unique experiences, trying to answer their questions about Trump's immigration policies and rhetoric, hoping to convey some sort of like, we're not all like him, and I don't hate you, and I'm glad to have this time with you, but not really knowing how to say that. And you mentioned that the Statue of Liberty, or you mentioned the UN, and like also comes to mind is the poem and the Statue of Liberty, which reads in part, "Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flames the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles, from her beaconed hand glows worldwide welcome." Again, this is aspirational. This isn't really America now, and it's not really America throughout our history. And it's like how we want to see ourselves. And though he was writing about racial segregation, Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail comes to mind again, when he said, "For years now, I have heard the word wait. The wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our own distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied." And you can quote all the statistics you want to racist xenophobes about how immigrants actually make communities safer.
Yep.
And how African immigrants are often more educated than the places where they end up.
Indeed.
But fear and hatred of immigrants and refugees has become so normalized, so mainstream, that it feels like what causes refugees, what displaces people in the first place, those will continue to go ignored. And with climate change, they're going to get worse. And I think this song is an encouraging anthem to those making the trek, but also a warning that arriving to an asylum won't be the end of their journey. And maybe even more importantly, the song is a caution to you and me to never get too comfortable that we're only like one wildfire or earthquake or hurricane or government crackdown or blight or famine away from losing everyone and everything that we know and love.
Well said. Well, to rate this song, I see this as an incredibly mature song in sound, structure, and skill of performance. I could see this being the kind of song that is a massive stylistic shift for the band if they make like another 2 or 3 records.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So right now we have 7 records by Propagandhi. So imagine, if you will, a 9th or a 10th Propagandhi record, right? Imagine that they're at it for another decade and they crank out some more records. Victory Lap is like a slower record tempo-wise. I could see this song, Cut Into the Earth, being like a prevailing sound on like a 9th Propagandhi record. Like this weird creativity, the delicacy, but the intensity still. The notion that did just whatever they felt like musically, even though this was such a departure from the previous record, Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And this is the kind of thing you love to see bands do, even if you don't
Mhm.
get it at the time. I did not
Right.
get it at the time, but holy crap, I'm glad this exists. This makes me want to revisit stuff I didn't get the first time from all bands that I've ever loved and like let it wash over me anew and see what I missed the first time when I was a dummy and didn't really care. And like doing this show is helping me see songs in new ways that I blew off for years because I had like a harder time bashing my steering. I had a harder time like bashing my steering wheel and air drumming in my car in 2005. But what a song, blows me away. But I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, Todd's lyrics, his visceral empathy, his aching love, are writ large all over this song, lyrically and musically. I think it is challenging as a listener, and I'd also suspect it's challenging as a musician. And the message, unfortunately, seems as though it will always be relevant. So I also think it's a 4 out of a 5 for me.
Yeah, it's the fact that this song will be relevant and will only get more relevant over time is
Mhm.
so infuriating to me. And like you said, with impending climate disasters, this is just going to exacerbate the condition that so many people complain about and moan about is refugee resettlement programs, immigration, blah, 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 closing the borders. It's only going to get worse, and those people are only going to get angrier. So steel yourself because this ain't going away.
Yeah, listen to the song "We Fail" by the Swedish D-beat band Victims if you want a kind of a pretty big wake-up call. That song, I think, really closely parallels and overlaps with "Cut into the Earth."
Fantastic. Well, this has been our conversation on Cut into the Earth from Potemkin City Limits. What a song. Thank you so much to David Guillas for taking some time to hang out with us and to talk about your appreciation of Propaganda and the role that they've played in your life. Everybody should definitely go check out David Gillis's new band, Agassi. You can find them. I bought the vinyl, and it came directly from Derek Hogue, the drummer, who was also the co-host for Escape Velocity Radio. So, who plays drums in Agassi with David. So definitely check out David's new band and just appreciate the time that David spent in the band. Fantastic creative guitar player. So grateful that you were able to come on and hang out with us. So if you want to follow us, you can find us on the socials on Instagram at PropagandaPod, on Twitter at PropagandaPod, and you can email us at propagandapod@gmail.com. Love your letters. We recently attended the Manitoba Podcast Festival, so shout out to Sam Thompson from Witch Police Radio for the invitation and for having us. We absolutely loved it, and thank you so much, everybody. We will see you next time.
With nothing you will give all you have. And if you navigate your way with endurance and success, if you pass the obstacles and still have your life, if you've escaped death, if your guts haven't withered away, if you haven't broken under the strain.